Charlotte, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. The Netflix documentary, The Most Hated Man on the Internet, got a lot of people riled up. But, yourself and, people like James McGivney, Anonymous, those were the real silver linings, of the documentary. So before I delve into the documentary, I kind of want to, come to terms of what, your background, what was your, where you grew up, that type of thing. How did you become the force of nature that is Charlotte Laws?
Well, I was originally raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was adopted when I was 2 months old. And I had a really tragic childhood. My father was verbally abusive. My mom committed suicide. And then when I was 16, and then my brother was killed in a car accident when I was 18. So, and I was like the black sheep, not only the black sheep of the family, but the black sheep of the community, because I had very different values than most of the people I knew growing up. So I always wanted to escape. Yeah. And I supported the civil rights movement, which my family didn't. My family were racist, and a lot of the people in the community were. And so I kind of became an activist at a young age, and eventually, fought not only for civil rights, but for gay rights and animal rights, and then eventually women's rights with revenge porn. Yeah. And I believe that genetics are much stronger than environment. And I believe that my genetics that came from my birth family, which I ended up tracking down and meeting my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister, and finding out about all of them, I have a lot in common with them. So I definitely agree with Steven Pinker, who's an expert in this field, that it's mostly genetics and not environment.
Okay, very interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. I read that you lectured, you were a lecturer at the FBI Academy in Quantico.
I was, actually. They contacted me. It was based on what they consider to be animal terrorism. So there's something called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which in the United States basically says that if you do anything illegal while trying to help animals and it causes the enterprise to lose money or to put any fear into any of their customers, you can be prosecuted as a domestic terrorist. As stupid as that sounds, that is a law in this country. And so you block a sidewalk to a McDonald's with signs because you're protesting on the sidewalk, you could technically be indicted as a domestic terrorist. And this law only applies to animal people. So they called me to lecture in Quantico, and I lectured police chiefs from around the country and told them basically the mindset of an animal rights activist and what the values were, what the mission was, etc. And feel like I made a positive impact with that.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, you're very persistent, to say the least. You also have a history of crashing some big events. In fact, I believe you were listed as the 4th most notorious party crasher in the world. How did you get into that?
Well, I started back, when I was in Atlanta, and I realized that the show business people tend to be very open-minded. They're not prejudiced. They're like one big family. And I became very interested in being part of that family because I didn't have my own family growing up. Yeah. And I also was interested in a particular well-known singer, Tom Jones. Since I was a little kid of 9, I was interested in him, as crazy as that sounds. So I started pursuing him when I was, basically when I was 18, I ended up getting a date with him and dating him for 3 years. So he was my first boyfriend. And it was kind of amazing because he was my dream guy, but I had very low self-esteem my entire childhood, and that certainly raised it quite a bit when that happened. It was like Cinderella's story for me.
I mean, after, obviously you were recognized before, this whole documentary came out, but I've got to say they should make a documentary just about you, because your life is just insanely fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's happened, that's for sure.
If you read your biography and that type of thing, Hunter Moore should really have done his homework on, you know, who he was kind of messing with. Because you are probably the prototype of you know, the anti-Hunter Moore who he didn't want to cross paths with, in a way. Now, back to the documentary. When Kayla's photo went up, you pretty much sprang into action immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what did you make of when you guys went to the police and the police officer in question kind of implied, well, it's Kayla's fault? You know, what was the frustration levels like then?
It was very frustrating that she was victim blaming, and frankly, that's what all of society was doing with revenge porn victims at that time. The media, law enforcement, and regular people. And it was before the Me Too movement, so it was, you know, sorry, you shouldn't have taken that picture. It's your own fault if you have a new picture online. That was pretty much everybody's point of view.
Yeah.
And it was very frustrating because these victims felt so violated and so humiliated, and they didn't even feel like they could fight for themselves. I mean, that's why it became so important for me to step into action, because my daughter and other victims just couldn't really, they didn't have the ability to fight for themselves. So I was happy that the FBI actually had a very different view. They did not do any victim blaming, and they literally just investigated the case.
Okay. I read somewhere that Hunter Moore has a sister who does missionary work. Is that true?
I've read that, and I think it's probably true. I'm not 100% sure, but that is what I believed back in 2012. I had found that information back then.
It's like about two different sides of the spectrum for two siblings.
I know.
Have you ever been in contact with his parents? Because I think a lot of people have been asking, well, how were his parents okay with this?
You know, I tried to call his mom at one point. When I was reaching out and trying to get him to remove my daughter's picture, I contacted his attorney, his publicist, some of his advertisers. I was calling anybody and everyone associated with him. And I also called what I thought was his mom's workplace, but it turned out she had left that job. So I ended up just talking to her colleagues, or her former colleagues. So I've never actually spoken to his mom or his father. I did see them in the courthouse, and they pretty much ignored me and didn't seem, you know, pleased with me, I guess would be my view of their expressions.
Crazy. Yeah, his lawyer said he was frustrated with Hunter. You know, what's your opinion on him?
I mean, I think he was in a difficult position because
Yeah.
he was representing a guy, and he may not have agreed completely with what his client was doing. And I think he was, you know, put in a hard position because all these victims and their reps, like me, were calling and trying to get content removed, and he didn't feel like he had a lot of control. When I spoke to him a couple of times, and I definitely felt that he had more control than he was letting on. But it took my husband to call him, because my husband was an attorney, in order to have that conversation, to put the pressure that was necessary to get that content removed.
Now, your husband, Charles, he didn't spring into action straight away, but I mean, to his defense, you can kind of, I mean, he grew up in a different era, didn't he? You know, I don't think he understood the magnitude of what was happening.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I mean, he's a lot older than me. He's almost 20 years older than me, and he hardly ever goes on the internet, and he just doesn't really understand, you know, how things can, you know, a picture can end up on one site, then 5 sites, then 50 sites, then 500 sites. You know, he didn't really grasp that. He thought for some reason it would disappear. So, you know, he had to be educated on how the internet works and what would happen with a topless picture.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have had to educate our parents and stuff on, you know, how stuff works, especially when they get onto social media and they start posting random stuff.
Right.
What wasn't in the documentary? I heard there was something about you guys had a stalker.
Yeah, there was a stalker at the house, and this was actually kind of after, this was like a year into it, and the FBI, I didn't know if they were still investigating because they weren't returning my calls anymore. They had already done the raid, but they hadn't, it seemed like I think they had already done the raid at that point. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, I didn't think they were still investigating. Hunter didn't think they were still investigating. So he got very bold, and that's when he had already taken his site down because he was afraid of the FBI. And so then he decided, oh, they're not investigating me anyway. They dropped it. I'm just going to put the site back up, except I'm going to make it worse. Not only am I going to put up the same content, but I'm going to put up the home addresses of victims with driving directions on how to get to their houses. And that's when I made his home address public on Twitter. And that's when the stalkers showed. I mean, everything got really ratcheted up at that point. So the death threats were coming in. I was getting the computer viruses still. And then this guy was sitting at the street. And I had been told by the computer repairman that to beware of any unusual cars or vans on the street, because if someone wants to hack into your network, they're probably going to need to be near your house. And the first time the car was out there, I didn't see the car. Kayla saw the car, and she didn't tell me till the next day. So I couldn't really accuse her of paranoia because she didn't even know what the computer repairman had said, right?
Yeah.
And then it was the next night where she was studying at the window, and she saw the car again, and she said, Mom, that car's outside again. And I was so fed up at this point. I was like, it was time for a mother to stalker showdown. That was it. I had it. So I march out there to this car, and Kayla's running behind me going, Mom, what are you going to do? Mom, what are you going to do? And I go up and I said, may I help you? And this kid, he's like in his 20s, he has blonde curly hair, and he's doing something in his lap. He looks up, he freaks out, he turns the car on, he zooms away, he almost hits the neighbor's wall, which to me was pretty guilty because if you're innocent, you just say, oh, I'm waiting for your neighbor, or, you're not going to say, So anyway, so that was one thing that was not in. I'm very surprised they didn't put that in because I thought that was kind of important, but, I guess they ran out of time, etc. And the other thing they left out was when I went undercover to one of Hunter's gigs. He was DJing at a place in Long Beach.
Yeah.
And a victim wanted me to help with the process service for legal papers. And so I was supposed to be the witness. But Hunter knew what I looked like by that point. So I wore this black wig and this pasty white makeup and sunglasses and this beatnik beret and this tacky velvet jacket. I mean, I looked really ridiculous. And I went down there and I parked my car in this huge parking lot. I turn around, and who's standing there staring at me? Hunter Moore. It was so weird and so coincidental. And he and 3 other guys were walking to a van, and he didn't recognize me, thankfully, and he continued on his way. But that was the first time I was actually face to face with him. He just
Did you go alone?
I went down there by myself, yes. But there was supposed to be another process server who was supposed to meet me there because they were going to do the actual serving. I was the witness because he had been denying service. And so we were trying to get as many witnesses as possible because other victims had served him like in another club in San Francisco, and he tore it all apart and denied that he was ever served. So anyway, just another day in the life of a revenge porn activist, what can I say?
Well, a lot of people are wondering, I suppose it's a different time now, and I mean, how did, a lot of people asked me when they heard that you agreed to be on the podcast, they want to know, how didn't someone during that time, or maybe even now, I don't know, how has no one beaten 7 shades of shit out of this guy? I mean, is it because of his following? Were they a little bit...
well, his following were devoted. I mean, it was a cult.
Yeah.
It was like a Charles Manson cult.
Yes.
So they called themselves the children. He was the father. They were, it was the family, just like Charles Manson had. And they would say, I will kill for you, father. They would do like the most outlandish stuff to try to get his attention or to give him content for his website. So they were very scary. They were scarier than Hunter Moore. I mean, Hunter Moore is some kid who, he made a lot of threats. I never really thought he was going to come and try to kill me. I was actually more afraid of his followers because there are these faceless people, anonymous people who I don't know who they are. They could be, ex-cons, they could have guns, they could have anger issues. You just don't know who these people are. So that was scarier to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the thing is, I don't think you can be right in the head if you, we saw some of the things that these guys, this one guy's punching himself in the face, the other girl is brushing her teeth with, I don't even want to get into that, but
no, I know.
I mean, at what point is your self-esteem that low that you would do that? Do you know what I mean? So these people definitely aren't stable.
There were a lot of them. He had 600,000 followers at one point, so there were a lot of people who, agreed to do really crazy things. So I don't know. I think it was, the whole mindset. His mindset is if you tear other people down, somehow it builds you up. So I think that a lot of them were the same mindset. That you
Yes.
ridicule other people to make you feel better about yourself.
Well, to put it bluntly, they were losers of society. I mean, there's no other way to say it, really.
Yeah.
But so I believe Hunter was going to take part in the documentary, and then he basically pulled out last minute or something.
That's what I was told. That's what I was told. Yeah. He
There's
just
no real...
he didn't really, because I've seen he's done a couple of very casual interviews with somebody who was a friend of his, who apparently is no longer a friend as of a few days ago. But he did these interviews, and he's not apologetic. He's not remorseful. He says, "What would you have done differently?" He said, "Oh, I just would have gone 10 times harder," which, I mean, I don't know what that means. He would have tried to cause murders. I don't know what that means. So I think that, his view was not repentant, and I think that probably the filmmakers were, surprised and thought, aren't you sorry at all for what you did? And I think that didn't really mesh maybe with, because what is there to do? I mean, if you're going to interview a guy who is the same as he was back in 2012, there's not a lot of new information there. He didn't really have anything to say. And so my guess is that he realized very quickly there was nothing to add to the conversation, and there was no reason to do the documentary.
I think he said something along the lines of, I did my time. I don't have to apologize to anyone. Typical, arrogant,
right.
Whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and that was. I was kind of surprised. I think I know which interview you are referring to. I think he's been on this guy's show twice. I think it's another podcast.
It's a podcast.
Yeah, and I just couldn't understand why he was given another platform. Because I mean, that's what started the shit in the first place.
Right.
Was giving him a platform. But in any case,
well, he's supposedly on some other website. There's I can't remember what it's called, but it's similar to Twitter or Facebook. And he's on this other site, and he's starting to build followers, is what I understand. And they're posting consensual nude pictures, which, if it's consensual, I don't have a problem with that, as long as it's consensual. But apparently, they are, doing things that some people think are objectionable. Some people are saying they're minors on the site, pretending to be adults, and there are a lot of allegations coming out. So this is what I hear. I haven't checked it out myself, but this is the rumor that's going around.
Yeah, I think I never knew about this whole "is anyone up" thing. None of my friends did either. I don't think, we didn't really associate with anyone that would know about it, so I suppose that's probably why.
Right.
And just with while watching the documentary, just when you think things can't get any more shocking, a girl introduces herself as Butthole Girl. And I mean, and then you find out her real name is Destiny. You want to start getting into the irony of that. But what is your opinion of? What is your opinion of? Is she fairly portrayed? Because she still says that she misses the site or those days or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the name, Butthole Girl from back then, but I never paid attention to her or any of that. So I never really investigated it. So the first time I really knew anything about it was in the documentary when I watched it. And I don't know much about her. I mean, I've never met her. I really don't know. But I know there are a lot of people who were followers of his who now feel bad about that. And I've been contacted by some of those people saying, I really apologize, and I don't know why I was following him. And so people have had a change of heart. A lot of his followers have. Yeah,
that is great.
Yeah.
It was just so strange that why she would voluntarily. I mean, someone with that type of history, you'd want to kind of think that you'd hope people would forget about that side of you. But now to come on a Netflix documentary and pretty much rehash what you did back in the day, I don't know, it just makes no sense to me. But
well, I'm glad she did, because I think it's important to kind of, for the viewer to get a sense of what it was really like back then. And I think that the filmmakers did a good job of portraying what it was like. And I think she was part of what that was. That whole mindset back then. And so I'm glad she was in it because she adds a dimension to it that, was there and that people can now see what what was going on and what it was like.
She adds one hell of a dimension to it. And then, I mean, his girlfriend as well, I forget what her name was. I think her surname was
Kara Hughes.
Yeah. Thoughts on her? I mean, she also, I don't know, a lot of people, I've been obviously been doing research for this interview, not a lot of people seem to have a lot of sympathy for her, which I can completely understand from my side.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know much about her. I knew her name back then. She seemed to very much stay out of it as far as the site goes. There never seemed to be any interaction between her and the website, as far as I could tell. Hunter always said, "This is my girlfriend," and he had that listed with her name as his girlfriend, and that was really all I knew about her. So the first time I had ever seen her was again in the documentary, and again she adds texture and dimension to it because you get to kind of see what was going on. So I mean, I think they did a good job of bringing these people together. I was actually surprised they were able to get all these people to go on camera, to be honest. So
well, exactly. I mean, back to Destiny. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they could get them on is great. I mean, it does, as you said, it adds a dimension to a documentary.
Right. Because there were a lot of victims, like a lot of the victims who were part of this FBI case with my daughter, none of them would go on camera. None of them agreed to be in the documentary. And that's one reason a lot of these stories were not told. There were some very good stories. Like one of the victims was kind of my sidekick. I mean, literally, she helped me with the investigation a lot. Her whole story was completely not used in the documentary because she didn't want to go on camera. But she was from Iran. And she, people, when her pictures went up, they said, "Oh, I hope she gets stoned to death." And she had this very conservative family, and her father at that point wanted to have a trip back to Iran to see relatives. And she was freaked out because she said, "I can't go there with this picture online. I could be killed. The authorities could put me in prison or kill me." And so it was really scary for her. And so she was, very much worked. And she was, even though she was a victim, she was very bold and able to really kind of help with the investigation. So that was an important story that unfortunately we didn't have time to tell or the ability to tell.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of understand it as well.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, these Netflix documentaries have a way of reaching quite a massive audience around the world.
Right.
Do you think a shitstorm could be heading Hunter's way? Because I think a lot of people, well, I've spoken to a lot of people and they all say, well, how is this guy still alive? Pretty much.
Well, I mean, I hope he will get his life together. I mean, I don't know what he's doing now. I know that people are telling me that he lives back with his parents again. There was one guy that came on my Twitter and said that he apparently had delivered pizza and that he's working for DoorDash, or he was. So I don't know if that's true or not. So kind of ironic. I mean, you have this big website and you think you're king of the world, and now you're delivering pizza for DoorDash. That would be kind of humorous. But, I just hope he doesn't get into crime again. And I'm concerned because I'm hearing these stories about this other website that he's now on, and he's starting to build his following. And that concerns me that, he may kind of get back into all this. He doesn't seem like he's grown up. He's kind of like a dinosaur. He's stuck in 2012. He doesn't realize that we've had the Me Too movement, that society has changed, that we're not victim blaming anymore, that, it's not like, all women are sluts. I mean, all of these ideas that he has are not part of our conversation anymore. Our society doesn't accept that anymore. So it's hard to say what his future is. I don't think people are going to beat him up, though. I mean, he's not been beat up yet, so I'm guessing he's going to survive.
It's a mystery to me and to a lot of other people. But anyways, we're not inciting violence on my podcast. But yeah, it's I mean, it probably could depend on his ego. I mean, it looks like he's got a massive ego when you look at the documentary and with his followers and stuff. He says he started the whole website because supposedly a girl broke his heart, something like that. I think could it be that he started something And this thing just got so big, it fueled his ego, and he just kind of ran with it and just completely took him over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he was like back before all of this started, but he definitely had a God complex at this point, and he definitely is still, in my view, he still seems like he's pretty arrogant. He certainly was arrogant in court, and he certainly never apologized. He hasn't apologized, so I think he's still the same guy, unfortunately. So he's and he's admitted, he admits that he had this arrogance. He liked all the press coverage. He liked being having a feature in Rolling Stone and being in mainstream media, and the press were loving him. They were glorifying him. They were giving him the headlines and the big picture, and oh, isn't he cool and innovative? An innovative way to make money. I mean, that's how the press were treating him. And I would say even today, about 50% of the news outlets, when you read the articles, 50% of them are still glorifying him. They're still going, oh, where is Hunter Moore now? We're so interested. Tell us all about Hunter Moore. And then the other ones are focusing more on the victims and the damage that he did. So it's kind of a 50-50 with the media at this point.
I suppose it's about sensationalism. I suppose that's what unfortunately what it comes down to is what is going to grab the headlines and that type of thing.
Right.
You were voted one of the 30 fiercest women in the world by BuzzFeed.
That's a big honor. I like
Explains why the stalker, drove away and nearly crashed into, the neighbor's wall and whatever. But I have to ask, I believe Kayla recently got married. Now,
She did.
Congratulations. But we've all seen the movie Meet the Parents. Well, for those of you that haven't watched it, it's a comedy with Ben Stiller and where he meets the in-laws. Now, your son-in-law, what's it like having Charlotte Laws as a mother-in-law? Is he?
Well, I don't know. You're gonna have to ask him that.
Like 24/7?
You have to ask him what he thinks. But he's a great guy. He's very philosophical. He's kind of almost like a therapist type. He has a degree in therapy, and so he's kind of a deep guy, and he's a great guy. So I'm pleased.
What are his? Well, I probably shouldn't ask what his thoughts are on Hunter Moore, but I mean it's pretty obvious what it will be.
Yeah, I mean he probably has the same position as the rest of the world does, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And he also, Hunter Moore also doesn't say anything about you. In watching interviews and stuff, he doesn't say much.
I know it. He doesn't say anything. He never mentions my name. I think he's probably been advised not to by his attorney. I'm guessing because it's kind of weird how they asked about me and he's like, nope, he's not going to say anything, and he doesn't really say anything about Kayla either. So yeah.
Are you still close to some of the victims?
I haven't talked to them in a little while. I talked to most of them about a year or 2 years ago. So I'm not in regular contact, but I mean, I'm, certainly on good terms with them. And, a few of them have contacted me since the documentary came out. So, that's kind of it.
Okay. You're a big animal lover as well. You're basically the founder and president of Directors of Animal Welfare and League for Earth and Animal Protection. How did you get into this?
I just, my whole life I actually kind of had empathy for other living beings, and I consider myself, religious-wise, I consider myself a Jewish Jain. Jainism is an Indian religion, and the main principle is ahimsa, which is non-injury to all living beings. So I became originally a vegetarian when I was around 20 years old or so, 21 years old, and then eventually a vegan. And I just realized, all living beings have interests, and, I feel that, when you treat animals as lesser, it's a form of prejudice called speciesism, and it's no different from racism or sexism or anti-Semitism. And ever since I was a little kid, I just felt like my mission, and I always thought I had a mission, crazy as that sounds, but I always felt my mission was to, work towards eradicating prejudice. So that prejudice also translates into how we treat other living beings. And so I really want to see us, and I want to see us move from a democracy to what I call an omniocracy, which is a government with representation for all living beings. Democracy is of, by, and for people. It's all about the elite, the humans who have all the power. I'd like to see us shift that so that we actually do care about others. And when I was on a local council. I was elected to be on a local council called the Greater Valley Glen Council. And when I ran for that platform, my platform is that I represent all beings in my district, not just the humans. And so I really feel like that's the way that our society needs to move.
Okay. Well, you were definitely put on Earth for a mission. So I
don't know. Well, I read an article once that said 1/3 of all people in the world think they have a mission in life. So I'm one of the 1/3. That's how I concluded it.
Okay, great. You've basically got, you got 2 master's degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees. You completed a postgraduate study at Oxford University. What does a typical day in your life look like?
Well, lately I've been doing a lot of writing. So, I'm working on a book and, I've been doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Back when all of this happened, I was doing several things. I was working on my memoir, which was initially 1,000 pages. So it had to be divided kind of into 2 books. Okay. And then I was also on the council that I just mentioned.
Yes.
And then I was also a commentator on an NBC show where we discussed news and current events. And it was called The Filter with Fred Rogan. So those were kind of the things I was doing. And I've also been a real estate agent for like 35 years. So I was doing real estate as well. And everything had to be put aside when my daughter's topless picture went online because I knew that I had to focus on that. And I did very little for 2 years other than trying to get Hunter Moore off the internet, trying to, get him arrested by the FBI and making sure he didn't continue to victimize. So it was time consuming.
If there wasn't, let's say you weren't involved at all, you and Kayla weren't involved at all, and there was no hacking, do you think that site would still have been up?
It's entirely possible. Who knows? There wouldn't have been, the only way that you could get your content down or have a prayer of getting it down was through the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Because when you take a picture of yourself, you own the copyright. But, we were sending notices to Hunter Moore saying it's a copyright violation.
Yeah.
And he didn't care. And the reason he didn't care is because he didn't care about civil suits. Because he had no assets. So what does he care if everybody on Earth sues him? Who cares? So I owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Who cares? I don't have any money. I'm not going to pay them anyway. That was his mindset. And that's the mindset of most of these perps who do this kind of thing. So it doesn't really help much. You really need to have anti-revenge porn laws. You need to have something stronger to keep these perps from doing it. And for some reason, I find they just don't want to go to jail. Not only Hunter Moore, but I find that the guys who do this in general are very afraid of law enforcement, which is why the laws are so important.
How is this not federal law yet?
Well, there have been several obstacles. The first has been the ACLU, who was opposing me all the way back when I first started trying to get a law passed in California, because we were the first state to have a fully anti-revenge porn law. And their argument is just simply this is free speech, and sorry, people should be able to post topless and nude pictures even against the victims, without the victim's consent, because it's free speech. That's their argument. And so they have been fighting this. And then also, in addition now, we have certain individuals of the progressive side of the Democratic Party who just simply like to defund the police mindset, who do not want additional laws because they don't want more people going to prison. They want to empty, people out. They want to let people out of jail rather than put more people in jail. And so those have been 2 of the biggest obstacles for Congress, is what I'm told. And at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to pass. Last time I talked to Jackie Spear, who is the congresswoman who brought forth the latest measure, she said there's only a 4% chance it's going to pass, and she's leaving after this term, and there's no indication that anyone else is even going to be pushing for this or bringing it forward. So, I don't know when it's going to get passed, but I think it's very important that we have it and it have some, teeth in it, and that it be a felony, and that it be a law that pertains to the whole U.S. Because right now, having individual laws in different states, it's not consistent, it's confusing. You have a victim in one state and a perp in another state. It's not even clear which law would prevail.
Yeah, it's the fact that you even have to fight for this is ridiculous. But I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the world we live in. But well, Anonymous, they helped out. I mean, they were the other
They
silver
did.
lining. Is it really true what they did to him? They erased his identity. That he was declared dead for 1 month.
I don't know if it's true or not, but it's very funny. I mean, I haven't ever looked into whether all that's true, but they definitely did dox him. And they contacted me the day before they did this to say that, don't worry, we're going to protect you and we're going to go after him tomorrow. And I didn't know if it was a practical joke or if it was real at the time, but I found out the next day they were for real. And I think, you can really credit them with the fact that the site didn't go back up. The worst site that he wanted to do, Is Anyone Up 2.0, didn't happen. And I think it's largely because Anonymous did this to him. And he was very afraid of them. He was afraid of the FBI and he was afraid of Anonymous. He was not afraid of me, clearly.
Well, I think he probably wasn't afraid of you because his followers were threatening you. So to him, he kind of used his followers as as a shield or whatever that he had at his disposal.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Charlie Evans, he was the hacker. It's Charlie Evans, right?
Charlie Evans, yes.
I listened to a telephone interview with him. He seems very remorseful. Have you ever spoken to him again, or had anything to do with him?
Well, we saw him in court, and he did apologize to Kayla in court. And, I don't know him, but he went to high school about a block from the house where Kayla was raised. So probably when he was in school, we probably walked right past his classroom or roller skated past his classroom on various occasions. So he was from our community, and my daughter had about 6 Facebook friends in common with Charlie Evans. She wasn't his friend, but she definitely knew other people that knew him. And, I don't really know much about him, other than the fact that he did apologize. But it was very odd because he kept hacking into people's accounts even after he'd been raided by the FBI. And the FBI was just shocked that he would be raided, he's under investigation, and he knew it, and he still kept hacking into accounts. It was just so weird. So I don't know what he's doing now. He was working at Disneyland at the time, I think, when all this happened.
You got the one at DoorDash, the other one's at Disneyland. This is great.
I know. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. James McGibney, another awesome guy. Were you guys close during this whole thing? When you guys were trying to take him down, did you guys communicate a lot?
No, I didn't really even. I mean, I had heard his name, and I might have had a conversation or two with him. I can't really remember. But he, he was also wanted the site to come down,
yes.
And Hunter was going to take it down anyway because the FBI were investigating him, and he was afraid that they were going to have more data. With the site up, it was going to be easier for them to rifle through his content. He forgot that he had a cloud. And that's what the FBI said. Thank God he had the cloud, and all the data was still in the cloud, so they were able to get access to that. But he took the site down, and then James was saying, "Oh, I'll pay for it." So he's like, he had to take it down anyway. He thought, "Fine, here, give me the money for it," and he sold it. And then, as I said, as we discussed earlier, he then thought he wasn't under investigation anymore, so he planned to bring it back because all James bought was the domain. So, you sell the domain, you could bring the whole site back an hour later with a different domain, So Hunter had that freedom because he didn't sell the content to James, only isanyoneup.com.
Yeah.
So all he has to do is buy isanyoneup2.com, and then an hour later, everything's back up again, and he's got all his followers happy. So, yeah.
As innovative, well, I suppose you can say Hunter was innovative in a very strange type of way. He also was, he wasn't that business savvy. He made a statement where he basically said he was going to be 100 million strong by the time he's 30. I think he was 24, 26 at the time when he said this.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sold the cash cow for 12 grand.
Right.
It's a strange one. I think this whole thing was pretty much fueled by the following that he did have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it's crazy.
And it's,
I mean,
you know, it's a shame because, you know, he was able, I mean, he obviously has some charisma because he's able to get these people to follow him. And so when you have that kind of charisma, it's good to use it for good instead of for making people miserable. So it's a shame that he hasn't used his, quote, talent. You know, I would call him a charismatic leader, just like Charles Manson was a charismatic leader. They're both able to get all these people to follow him and kind of do whatever they say.
Yeah.
But, you know, neither of them have used it for positive. And that's a shame. It's kind of a waste. And I hope that he eventually turns around and grows up and realizes that and puts his talents to good use.
No, 100%. I mean, you want someone like that to kind of turn a page and to basically say, listen, I was just playing the narrative of, you know, what people were following me for, and, you know, I was stupid back then, but I've, you know, turned my life around. He'll probably still get a massive following just for doing that.
I know, and that's why I can't believe he hasn't done it. Because honestly, it's like bad PR to do what he's doing right now.
Exactly.
I mean, everybody goes, oh, he's still a total jerk, and I still hate him. But if he were to turn around and go, oh, even if it wasn't sincere, and say, I'm so sorry, I was wrong, there are going to be a certain number of people who fall for it and go, oh, it's okay, Hunter, we forgive you. You know, there are going to be people who would do that. And yet he isn't doing that. It's just really bizarre. It's almost like his ego is so big, he just can't even admit he was wrong. He just can't, even though it would be better PR, he just can't bring himself to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like he thinks, well, you know, he probably likes the fact that this documentary came out again. I believe he was tweeting, he was allowed on Twitter again, I think.
Yeah.
And he was saying, oh, they're making a documentary about me, you know, kind of like in a boastful type of way. The other gentleman that did have him on his podcast, and I probably shouldn't have said, you know, why'd you give him a platform? I think he was kind of hoping that, because he did ask the question, you know, are you remorseful?
Oh, yeah.
So
he was trying to lead him into that on so, I mean, I watched, those things were so boring. I can't even be people sat through those interviews. It was like hard to stay awake.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was leading him in. He was trying to get Hunter to apologize and say, I'm remorseful. Hunter just wouldn't do it. You know?
Yeah, he was like, listen, I'm giving you a platform. It's a pretty well-known podcast. Well, I'm giving you a platform. Just say the right thing, you know? But
now that guy says he doesn't like him anymore.
I actually heard that, yeah.
And other people who used to follow, as I said, have been calling me and texting me and messaging me and saying, you know, I don't follow him anymore. I don't like him. I was wrong. You know, I'm getting a lot of that actually. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah. Well, that they're not following Hunter Moore.
Yeah, they're not following Hunter Moore anymore. They've completely distanced themselves. And they have no idea what they were thinking back then, and that's kind of what they're saying.
Well, yeah, I suppose. I mean, look, people do stupid things at you know, when they're young. I suppose, I don't know. I was never that stupid, but
neither was I. So.
But each to his own. I mean, goodness, if you know, a certain sports star, there's a bunch of people that I look up to, but if one of them told me to do some of the things that, you know, to get in their good graces like they did, no, it's
right.
Not that much.
I
mean, Charlotte, what are some fascinating, or what's a fascinating gate crashing story that you have that we don't know about, or that I don't know about?
Well, I don't know if you know any of them, but I'll tell you one of them that was fairly recent. I did learn as I got older that, you know, party crashing can be used for really good purposes. So you can use it to push for legislation, to lobby for, you know, some kind of law.
Or date Tom Jones, you know?
Or a date Tom Jones. Well, that one I was younger too, so that was, you know, back in those days. But or you can, you know, use it to raise money for causes, and you know, there are a lot of reasons why you might want to gate crash.
Okay.
So, for example, these politicians will have fundraisers that are $40,000 a person or $100,000 a person to get in. So the rich people get the FaceTime with the politicians, so they get to push their agenda. But regular people like me who don't have that kind of money, you know, the only way I'm going to get in to have FaceTime with Barack Obama, for example, is to crash his fundraiser and then, you know, talk to him about what it is I want to talk to him about. So they were having a fundraiser, for example, at George Clooney's house, which is in Studio City, and I wanted to get him there. And so I drove my Nissan up to the Secret Service, and all these cars were kind of waiting at the bottom, like limos and stuff, waiting to pick up the guests, And I pretended to have a pharmaceutical delivery for a Mr. G. Clooney, and they didn't know what to do. Do I let her up? Do I not? Thank God they didn't look in my little bag because it had ponytail holders in it. It did not have anything pharmaceutical in it, but they let me up, and I got into the event. And so that's an example of something, and that was in 2012. In 2018, I went to the Golden Globes, and I've been to like all the award shows, but it was really hard that year. They had the streets blocked like way out from where the Beverly Hilton was, where it was being held, and they wouldn't even let cars near the Beverly Hilton. It was so weird. So I wanted to go because I wanted to give my book. This was a book that I had written about my grandfather. I wanted to give it to Oprah Winfrey. And because I wanted her in her book club, I wanted to have a chance at that. And her website said, "Don't send us your books because if you do, we throw them straight in the trash." That's what it said. So I thought, okay, I've got to hand it to her. And that was the only. That's the only place I knew where she was going to be. So I was able to step over this barrier. All these people are staring at me. Here I am in my long gown and everything. I had to walk through this construction zone behind the Beverly Hilton. So I'm stepping past trailers and mounds of dirt, in my long dress. I get close to the back door of the Beverly Hilton, and there's some guards out there, and one comes over to me and says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I was already in. I just went up to Starbucks to get some coffee." And for some reason it worked. I got into the event. I handed my book to Oprah Winfrey. I ended up sitting in the front, which was really fun because I was on camera all the time. So all my friends were like, "Oh my God, how did she get in there?" So it was fun.
Was this, and then you were on her show afterwards, or was this?
I was on her show back in the very first year, about 88 maybe, or something like that.
And
so that was a long time ago. That was a different book. That was my first book, with Meet the Stars. So yeah, I was on her show a long time ago. Yeah. I don't know her though, personally at all. I don't know Oprah. I've just met her those 2 times.
I'm sure she probably remembers you.
I don't know. Hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah.
That's that woman who handed me a book at the Golden Globes.
Well, look, you probably don't have to gate crash anything because you probably get invited to all these things now, hopefully. Which would probably make it more boring for you because there's no challenge.
Absolutely. It's like the fun part is getting in. It's really true. I have gone to events where literally I get through the door, finally get in, and then I'm like, well, I might as well go home now because I'm already in.
It's just too easy.
So yeah, crashing is very exciting. It kind of gets your adrenaline going.
Wow. Yeah. Jeez. Well, Charlotte, that's pretty much all I've got. Well, I mean, there's so many questions that I'm sure I can still ask that I just don't have at the moment. But
that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Yeah, we got pretty riled up. I had friends phoning me and saying I had one friend in particular. He still wants to come down and find Hunter Moore, but whatever. Anyways, I mean, it just riles people up. I mean, especially what he said about James McGibney's family, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, it's good overcoming.
Well, I do know that Anonymous is keeping a very close eye on Hunter Moore, and I do know who these people are now. I've known for many years now, and they actually, I even had a conversation with one of them like a week ago. So I know who they are, and they are keeping a close eye, making sure that he doesn't break the law. So I think he should stay within the constraints of the law if he, wants to stay out of jail and stay untarnished.
Well, hopefully, conservatively speaking, hopefully he turns a page.
Right.
And something like that. Hopefully that bill gets passed. Number one.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great.
That would be absolutely brilliant. Charlotte, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it, and good luck with what else have you got going on now? What's next for Charlotte Laws?
Well, I'm just working. I just finished a script, and it's the first anti-animal cruelty movie that would be made. It's very mainstream. You don't even know it's an anti-animal cruelty movie till you get about 70% through. And then I also am writing a book, which is an academic book related to animal issues. And but if people are interested, I can tell you I have 2 memoirs, and I get a lot of requests for the party crashing stuff. But that book, Meet the Stars, that I wrote in the '80s, is out of print. But lots of party crashing stories and tips are in my memoirs. And so one is called Undercover Debutante, and the other is called Rebel in High Heels. And they're super inexpensive if you get the ebooks on Amazon. So they're fun and humorous, and it tells a lot about my life. So I mean, they're both different periods of my life.
Awesome. I'm definitely gonna check that out. Like I said, I think Netflix should make a documentary just about you. It's such a cool story. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.